Yes, when assembling your grading suite for either your home or a remote location, the most important thing that you'll find with this is you must have a monitor that's properly calibrated. And that's the wonderful thing with the ASUS monitors, is that there is a built-in calibration software. So all you have to do is plug your probe into the USB port on the monitor, connect the Thunderbolt connection from the monitor to your computer, and you're all set to go. And it's as simple as that. If you're using an HDMI or a DisplayPort connection, then you will need an additional USB connection for the data to be transported to the computer. Ask me sometimes about the composition of a suite. When I'm actually assembling a grading suite in a facility, it's always a good idea to have non-contaminant lighting source in the room. And so, for example, at the moment now we have some mixed lighting here, but just under a normal grading suite condition, this would not be existing. And so what we would normally do is have a lighting of 6,500 degrees Kelvin, and then we would have a soft glow behind the monitor, and this is very restful for your eyes during the grading process. A lot of people ask me too, sometimes the grading process, has it changed that much when I started out color grading to now in regards to customers attending the grading session? Well, it depends. This is actually depending on whether you have more, if you're doing more commercial work or if you're doing feature film work. Generally with feature film work, it's a minimum amount of people that would be attending. If you're doing commercial work, then anybody's guess. It can get up to, I've had situations where I've had up to 12 clients in the room at any one time. So this is things that you have to think about. Now, for example, now in the COVID era, client supervised grading sessions is pretty much a thing of the past now. So what happens is that people will sometimes be using remote links for supervision if they need to, or we just actually render out a copy and then they put it on Frame.io or IO Gates or anything like that, so they can just have a look at it and see what's going on. A lot of people ask me, what is the difference with the material that I get nowadays as opposed to the material that I used to grade with? Well, grading material now I find to be extremely simple, because in most times you're either getting log files or linear files, and there's always some sort of correction that's always built into these files. So it makes it, to achieve a basic correction, it's relatively simple. When I started, I was grading the old Technicolor movies, and these had absolutely no color correction in it. So you basically had to do one pass just to get the color so that it was visible or viewable. And then you would have to go back and look at the entire reel of film another time, then just to do the fine tuning and get the colors to exactly the way you wanted them to be. And so, keeping this in mind, the material I used to get was probably about 200 times more difficult to grade than the material I come by these days. Now, people ask me also the grading controls that I have nowadays, how do it differs from what we used to have. We used to use joysticks instead of trackballs. The functionality is basically the same. The joysticks had what was in the ring surrounding the trackball was actually inside the little joystick, and then the position or the color was actually the position of the joystick. And so we had several of, so I've worked on systems like this. I've also had systems that just had potentiometers or pots, and so, or sliders in some situations. So these were different ways of doing it, and they all have their pluses and minuses to work with. But in the end, you get the job done. Now, the first time I ever worked with trackballs was using the Pandora Poggle system. And that was the first time I was working with trackballs instead of joysticks. And the Pandora Poggle system, which was a very beautiful system to work with, because the trackballs were actually illuminated and they would change color depending on what mode you were in the color grading system. Now, a lot of people ask me too about angle of viewing. This is something that I find to be extremely critical when you're grading with a customer, because you want to make sure that the angle that he is looking at the monitor will give you the same color rendition as it is when you're looking straight on. And this was the issue with very early OLED displays, was the angle of viewing was extremely narrow. And this is what I find with the mini LED monitors now, that the angle of viewing is extremely wide. And also the new OLED displays that I've seen, such as the Asus PQ22, has an extremely wide angle of viewing. I mean, you can literally view it like from here and everything looks the same and there's no change of contrast. It's really beautiful. So these issues of viewing angle is really not so critical as it used to be. People ask me too, how much do I deal with sound? Okay, sound is not something that I deal too much with in the grading suite. I will deal more with it when I'm doing editing. When I'm doing editing of projects, then I will be probably dealing with more sound levels and mixing and things during the editing process. And so this is something that I always have to take into consideration for there.